Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our August 2026 webinar. We're going to kick things off now, and today's topic is an interesting one. We're going to be talking about how to start actually preparing business data for successful AI initiatives. So we'll be discussing a number of different topics related to this and we'll be diving into what are some of the number one challenges that enterprise businesses are facing when they're actually trying to implement AI across their organizations. We're also going to dive into how to actually properly approach some of these challenges and what are some solutions that exist today in the market. And finally, we're going to wrap up today's webinar by giving a quick product demo as to how Aparavi actually helps businesses safely prepare data for AI, all without actually exposing their sensitive data to any third-party AI labs. And for today's agenda, we're going to cover a number of topics, like I mentioned. We're first going to kick things off by discussing why are AI initiatives failing to deliver in the first place? We're then going to move over and start discussing how do we actually start properly building a data foundation that leads to true AI success across your organization. And then we're going to move and keep going in the webinar, and we'll start talking about how we can actually start transforming raw enterprise data into AI-ready data with Aparavi. And we'll wrap up today's demo by giving a quick sneak peek as to how we do this with a live product demo. And at the very end, we'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A from the audience. So let's dive into it. So I've got a little bit of a disturbing fact pulled up here, but it might surprise people, but it is the harsh truth in the market today. According to a recent 2025 MIT study, over 95% of enterprise generative AI pilots are failing before they even reach production. So this is a really startling fact given the amount of time, effort, and resources that go into these AI pilots in the first place. And it's really often a misconception that these pilots are failing due to the AI model itself or any of the underlying technology related to them. But what research is pointing to is something much different in regards to what is that causation. These generative AI pilots are failing not due to the model being selected or the other AI technology related to it. It's actually due to the data. And it's AI pilots are generally failing when models are lacking trusted business-ready training data. So it's truly a data problem that is causing these AI initiatives to fail. And generally, the issues relating to those data problems are a combination of a couple things. The first is that the data generally being provided in these Gen AI pilots is unknown. People are connecting entire repositories of data and they're not actually sure of what is contained within those repos, and they're exposing it to these models. And because that data is unknown, there's an inherent level of risk. We don't even know if there is sensitive information like PII or PHI or any other intellectual property. And as this data is completely unknown in many scenarios, it is noisy. So that data, more often than not, is duplicated, it's outdated, it's also stale and completely irrelevant. And this is what is actually driving up token cost use as well, because the model has to reason through RAG or other methods to actually extract that data and figure out is it relevant or not? And what is the correct answer to what I'm being prompted on? And when you're working with these large repositories like object storage or file systems, a lot of the data in there is also unstructured, which also is driving up token costs because you're then having to get the model to perform OCR, extract that data, and then reason to determine, is it relevant? Is it stale? Or is it something that is not useful for me? And while you're going about all of this, in many scenarios as well, that data is completely uncontrolled. We don't have any mechanisms in place to actually specify what an AI model should or should not have access to. We're basically giving the keys away to the kingdom. Now I'm going to move forward in the webinar and pass it over to Bobby for a moment to speak to these next couple topics.
And thank you. Just for people on this webinar, some context around my role here. I'm the VP of Engineering, and I actually only recently joined, but I've been diving deep into what the product has, and the product itself is quite fascinating because so I spent the last 15 years of my life building everything around data and governance and accessing data and provide and enabling companies to use that data effectively. So naturally, this product that we're working on it up directly into that paradigm. Um, I've um, I've had many conversations over the years, especially recently, with various leaders on the frustrations they have with and the anxiety that they have with exposing a lot of the data that they've accrued over the years into a public model. And a lot of their fears are very much founded in truth because a lot of these models do train on the data that we provide them. So a lot of large enterprises and really any industry that truly values privacy is trying to find a middle ground in order to use their data effectively while also leveraging modern tooling, AI agents, so on and so forth. So the if you look at sort of the way Aparavi operates and our product operates, we by design do not do anything outside of the context of your environment. So what that means is that we run in your infrastructure and we do not egress any data. You process every single piece of data within the context of your private ecosystem. And all that processing then leads to a deterministic output because we are using um, deterministic rules in order to do the classification. And that basically means that you will have outputs that you can trust and you can feed into your AI solutions so that you can actually act on that data. Just to reference back what Andy had said earlier, which was that the MIT report that mentions that 95% of Gen AI pilots failing. We've in the previous organization that I was involved in, this was a cause, and or rather, this was a frustration shared with the executives. And one of my mandates was to address that. And we looked at a solution like Aparavi, but none existed in the market. And lo and behold, Aparavi exists for this exact purpose. But the one of the more interesting things that we noticed in the process of doing this is that there was actually a lot of people within an organization that were all actively using AI, but what we call like shadow AI because it was not really blessed through the company's official channels for accessing it. And quite often they were feeding it proprietary information that they should not have. And really where we see this going is that we will get to a place where a lot of your private data will end up there if you don't close that down. And that's really the value that we're providing here is that you get to decide who gets what and you get to decide how they access it and you can have trust that the things that need to be redacted, the things that they don't need access to, are things that they will never get access to because that is what our product delivers as a solution. Andy, can you go to the next slide for me, please? Right. So this is the classifications that I was referencing before. So there's so I come from a background of contact center solutions. So we were involved in heavily regulated industries like healthcare, finance, bank, really like, and oil and gas is another one, like things where you've got all this like, very important data that is very critical to your company, and you obviously want to protect it because that is really the value that you drive as a company. So some of the regulations that you get tend to deal with in that tightly regulated space are HIPAA, you have FedRAMP, you have ITAR, you have GDPR, you have CCPA, you have the EU Act. So our product and all the classifications that we do, we take care of that for you. That's really the intent of our classifications. So as with the healthcare side, we've got PHI detection, and you can take your unstructured clinical notes, and you can output them to our reg solution. Similarly, with public sector, we've got the classifications for FedRAMP. The air gap deployment is something that will be very critical to you operating in a FedRAMP environment, and so that is something that we support as out of a box solution. It sits within your ecosystem, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, we get automatic classification of export control data. And as with large enterprises, you're probably dealing with lots of various regional compliance things, and our classifications do support those as well. Things like GDPR, CCPA, UA Act. And as with everything Andy had just pointed out earlier, the the strength of our product is that it's going to ensure that your output is to in a manner that won't have a lot of the dead data, the rot that if you will, that you accrue over time in an enterprise, especially ones that have been around for a long time. And that way, not only are you ensuring that your data is private, but you're obviously also ensuring that it's readily actionable. And as I mentioned earlier with the shadow AI, people were using those things because they didn't have the ability to feed their data into a tool that they could use within the context of the company. And that's really what we're positioning our product as is to enable every single one of your employees to leverage the data that you already have in place to provide actionable solutions for your company. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, no, thanks, Bobby. And it looks like we have somebody who's asked a question. So Kamal asked, Andy, Bobby, do you guys have any experience in the banking and financial services industry? So it's a great question. I mean, financial services and insurance in general are one of the types of customers that we really specialize to work with. They are a heavily regulated industry that has some of the most sensitive data that you can have, including PCI data. So kind of like what Bobby was mentioning, out of the box, we support the ability to automatically discover and classify PCI type data. So finding things like payment card
Credit card numbers,
information,
yeah,
yeah,
social security
addresses,
numbers,
phone
yeah.
numbers, socials, all of that we're able to detect automatically. And you can take proper actions to protect that data from being exposed to third-party AI labs. And you can do that in a couple ways. You could either subset and exclude that data, or you can mask that data while you're vectorizing and providing it to another model. If you guys have any other questions, please
Yeah,
feel free to
ping them
throw them in
through.
the
Yeah.
chat.
Does that somewhat address your concern, Kamal?
All right, looks like we're good.
Oh, all right.
So I'm just going to add on to what Bobby's been mentioning and just at a really high level explain how Aparavi helps businesses really transform that raw enterprise data into something that's usable and AI ready, all with our platform. So, like Bobby was mentioning, Aparavi itself is a solution that's installed within your network, which is behind your firewall. So it's either on-prem or within your virtual private cloud. So we're not a SaaS solution, so you can actually work with us with your most sensitive data, things that would be like sitting within your production zone. And the way that we work is we first connect to a variety of different types of data sources. either on-prem or in the cloud or a hybrid approach. And we specialize working with the most difficult data within your business. And that typically is unstructured data. So we ingest that data from a variety of different sources like object storage or your file servers or different types of applications and most Microsoft or Atlassian products. So once we can make that connection, we start ingesting that unstructured data and immediately start preparing it for AI. And we do this to make it safe, so all of that risk we were talking about is removed from the equation. The way that we start removing that is through a variety of different techniques. The first is we start subsetting that data. So we start excluding what is stale or duplicate or potentially irrelevant. And then from there, we start automatically discovering what sensitive data actually exists within those files. So we're going to start actually reading the files, indexing them, and classifying them to find anything that's PII or PHI, and you can set your own custom classification. So if there is something unique to your business that needs to be protected, you can set up those rules automatically with Aparavi to discover it and then take action. So once we have discovered all of that sensitive information, you're then able to start creating what we call AI collections. And these are essentially curated and safe and sanitized vectorized data sets. And these AI collections is what's made available to power your downstream AI systems. And really, what makes Aparavi different from other solutions in the market is that we're preparing data for AI without actually using AI to do that. A lot of other solutions in the market, they're actually using AI to prepare that data for AI, which means that there is still that level of risk of exposing your most sensitive data outside of your network to a third party. And the big outcome when using Aparavi is aside from just protecting your most sensitive data and what's critical to your business, is really enabling specialized downstream models. So you're able to feed in business critical data to help fine tune and train models. You can deploy your own models in-house. And at the same time, because we have dramatically reduced the amount of data that these AI models are working with, this is actually going to allow you to dramatically reduce your token costs at the same time. Um, and the big benefit of all of this is you regain control over your entire AI stack across your organization. Now, I'm going to switch gears now and pull open a quick product demo just to give everybody an idea of how this works. And we can just quickly see how easy it is to use. So this is the Aparavi platform. Again, this is installed within your network, either on-prem or within your VPC. And the way that it works is it's really two main pieces. One is what we call data discovery. This is really your data ingestion piece. And then the second piece are those AI collections I was mentioning. So you can create any number of sanitized and vectorized data sets, which are being used for a variety of use cases. So here, for instance, I have one that is set up for marketing. You could have one for your HR department and one for finance. And these are completely curated and clean data sets that can be used with AI safely. So let's start with the first piece, which is how do we actually start working with the data and start bringing it into Aparavi? So to do that, we can start a new scan. And our first step is to actually connect the platform to the data sources of your choice. So like I mentioned before, we can connect to a variety of different types of sources, such as your file servers. We can connect to things like AWS S3 buckets, Azure blobs, anything on-prem as well, and a lot of different Microsoft products like your different SharePoint sites, Google, Gmail, Atlassian, and so on. And we have the ability where we can very quickly turn around new connectors as well. So if there was a particular connector that you really want to ingest from, we can turn that around in about a week or so. So in this demo environment, I'm connected to two different sources. One is a file system for my server, and the other one is an AWS S3 bucket. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin the initial process. And this is essentially a metadata scan. This is where we're going to connect to your specified sources and start figuring out what's actually in there. Because that comes back to my earlier point, which is a lot of times why AI pilots are failing is we're connecting to data that is unknown. And so this metadata scan is giving us a basic understanding of what's in there. It's looking at what are the file types? What are the names of it? When was it created? When was it last modified? And we can start getting a bigger picture as to what is in these repositories. Once we've completed that metadata scan, we begin our first steps of actually starting to subset that data so we can start excluding things that are perhaps stale to us. If you think about it, if I'm in a sales organization and I'm trying to ingest data for that sales org, anything older than 12 months is not relevant to me. It's not up to date with customers. So I could actually go ahead and exclude anything older than 2 years, or I could go ahead and set something custom as well. And there will be scenarios where you actually don't want to work with particular file types. You might not want to include executables or DMG files. And so you can start excluding data that you know you would never want to work with. The next piece is really critical. This is our sensitive data detectors. This is where we're actually going to start looking for that sensitive information. So we can see some of the most common ones like full names or social insurance numbers or passport numbers. But these go really in depth. So for instance, you can actually set up different data detectors based on your region. So I could go ahead and turn on one for the EU. So we'd be looking for more GDPR related data elements, or I could do ones for Asia Pacific or Latin America and so on. For industry specific ones, you can turn on data detectors for anything medical or health related. So this would be like your PHI data or anything that would be HIPAA related. And you can turn on additional ones for financial services. So really looking for PCI level data, account numbers, and payment card information. But like I mentioned earlier, you're not limited to what just Aparavi offers out of the box. At any time, you can set your own custom data detectors. So you can either use regular expressions or you can provide keywords or patterns that we will go and search for across your different sources. So once you've set up the sensitive data detectors that you want to be working with, the next step is to actually start looking for that data and start subsetting it as well. And so we can continue to that next step, which is enriching that data. So this is where we actually start performing the initial indexing and classification of these files. And we get a basic understanding of, is there anything sensitive in these files that we can read from if it is a text file? And if it isn't, I'm going to show you how we can actually handle that in our next step. So this will complete, and the end state of this is we get a base data set now that's available to us to start working with to create our AI collections. I'll pause there for a moment and maybe we'll just check the chat if there's any questions. Okay, so JW said, is there a limitation on the data ingested into a knowledge collection, such as number of files, etc.? Bobby, do you want to handle that one?
So there currently is no actual limit. It's just more about the usability of it. So it really comes down to how you want to shape the data. But we don't actually have a limit on or a constraint on how to do how much we can handle.
Thanks, Bobby. Okay, so our data discovery portion has completed, and we can see and has completed. And now that we have our latest data ingested into Aparavi, we can start creating different AI collections. And we can see here's a few that I have that are format. So I'm going to use one of these. And really the first step is we want to create something that's curated for our use case. So we select the different sources we want to actually work with. So I might only want to work with my file system, or I might want to have data pulled in from all my sources. And we can specify that here. We then apply different custom filtering rules to start subsetting that data even further. Do I want to exclude data where there's known PII, or do I want to include data that's might require OCR? And so you can specify these different conditions as to what type of data you actually want to be working with. And we can see here, we get a list of all the different files that are going to be made available for this, creating this AI collection based off of the different subsetting rules you have listed here. And we can see here there's different tags for PII known, and this is from our previous step in data discovery where we have detected something. If, however, you have selected files where maybe it's a PDF and we have not performed OCR at this point, and so we don't know if there is something sensitive or not. Aparavi is automatically going to be able to detect that for you. So if we continue to the next step here, we can see out of all of those files that I'm currently ingesting, about 5 of them are actually images. And so we don't know at this point as to if there is something sensitive or not that we need to be aware of. And an additional 4 files are actually either video or audio files. And so that will require a transcription process. And on our next stage here, this is where we can actually perform that OCR and transcription functionality all within Aparavi. So we will automatically go ahead and start reading those image files, extract that data out, and apply those sensitive data detectors to determine if there is any risk with these files. And if there is risk, you can mitigate that. So for instance, we can go ahead and mask that data and we can specify how we want that data to be masked. Now, the next and final piece before we actually create our AI collection is to specify where do we want this data to be going? And it's completely up to you. So in this demo environment, I have 2 vector databases with Quadrant set up, but you can specify any type of export destination that you'd like. And this is what is going to be used for your downstream model. So this is going to enable better search, safer AI models work, and instead of just reg being applied to all of your sources with unstructured data. And this is really how you're able to start lowering token costs too, because you've been able to dramatically reduce the amount of files you're working with. Now, I want to show you guys as to what the outcome of all of this is. And so I'm just going to quickly turn this on and show you guys what this might look like. I'm just going to throw in an API key here. But what we're going to do is we're going to basically run a prompt and we're going to show how this prompt works with Aparavi versus uh, the standard RAG model. So I'm going to go ahead and select my Aparavi collection, and then I'm going to select like a standard RAG. And so if I were to run a prompt like, what is Andy Shaw's salary and employment history, we'll be able to really see a side-by-side comparison of what this looks like. And so what we're doing is a couple things. We're going to be running this prompt against Anthropic's Claude Sonnet 4.5. And what we're going to show is on the left-hand side, we're going to see what those outputs look like with an Aparavi vectorized database versus standard RAG. And the differences are going to be pretty substantial. And we have one more question from Danny, which is, are data type add-ons included in the base pricing of the product, like financial services add-ons? So yes, it's part of the base product with Aparavi. The way that we work in terms of pricing is strictly on the size of your source data that you're ingesting. So it's based on the number of terabytes, the types of classifications that you're applying, is all part of the base product. And you can spin up as many of these AI collections or vectorized data sets as you wish and have any number of users in the platform as well. So it's really just the size of your source data that is used from a pricing perspective. All right, so let's take a look at what the difference is here. So on the left-hand side, we've had that Claude prompt run with an Aparavi vectorized database, so an AI collection. And on the right-hand side, this is the typical output that you would see with standard reg if you were connecting Anthropic to your object storage. So on the left-hand side, we can actually see that we still get a correct answer. We get information about Andy's employment history, but nothing sensitive is actually being exposed to Anthropic or to the user. Whereas on the right-hand side, everything that we can see in red is something that is sensitive that we wouldn't actually want to expose to a downstream model or to the user potentially. Not only that, we can actually see that on the left-hand side, because we have sanitized and reduced the data that's being exposed to Anthropic, it's only connecting to 5 different data points. Whereas with standard reg, it is actually connecting to 14 different data points. And the reason why it's connecting to 14 is because we can see here there is a lot of historical data in here, and some of it is conflicting, some of it is duplicate, and of course, some of it is stale as well. And we can see all these different files here. And what ends up happening is the model actually has to spend more time reasoning to figure out what's the correct answer to the question I'm being asked. I have all of this data that's now conflicting and duplicate. What is what is the right answer here? And so what ends up happening is it spends more time and more tokens trying to reason and come up with an answer. And the way that it works is it's taking a bit of a guess. It's taking a probability on what it thinks is the correct answer and putting that forward. And because it's a probability, there is a margin of error where what you might get returned back from the model is actually incorrect and based off of that stale or duplicate or trivial data. So let's talk numbers because everybody loves numbers. What does this actually mean for the end user? When you're using Aparavi and running that query, you have about 4,700 tokens being used. In comparison with standard reg, that's over 11,000 tokens. So it's a dramatic increase in the amount of tokens being used when you're using standard reg. And to put that into a cost perspective, that's just 1 cent per query with Aparavi versus over 5 cents with a standard reg model. And when you're using that standard reg approach, you have that uncontrolled access to all of your sensitive data, and you're paying more for less accurate responses as well. So there's a lot of negative association with just going about a standard reg approach. Okay, so this is what we're hoping to show for today's demo. If anybody is interested in kind of learning a little bit more, please feel free to reach out after the webinar and we can set up some one-on-one time and we can dive deeper into the product, answer more questions, and explore how Aparavi can help with your different use cases. I'll switch back to the presentation for a second. We'll give the next 5 minutes or so for just open Q&A if anybody else has any other questions or thoughts.
So it seems like Ali and Nasiri has some questions around specifically the uniqueness of their data and whether our product can support it. So Ali, the way we've built this product, we expect it to be able to be a generic interface to things. So we do believe that it should work with your specialized data. However, if if you are concerned with whether that is something that is going to be an issue, that's sort of why I was directing you towards our solutions engineering team, because they can do the early analysis and ensure that your data is captured and supported for that. And we are obviously a growing product, and we want to drive that growth through our customers. So if there is things that you feel that you need in order to succeed in the mandate that you are trying to action, then we are more than happy to support you in that journey. Right. I think just to kind of address and not leave the questions in the silo, Kamala has asked a few very thoughtful questions. One would be whether we install anything in the client environment for our solution to work, and whether we have any experience in the banking financial services industry, and what a client would need to do in order to install our stuff within the ecosystem that they have. So in terms of the financial services side, we sort of touched upon it earlier, but our product very much sits in that exact ecosystem. Like we very much have focused on tightly regulated industries, because that's where we see the true value of our product. And so absolutely, our product does support like PCI and SOC 2 identification for things that it requires to identify and flag. And if you want to mask or redact, those are options that you have as well. We are our company is SOC 2 compliant as well. In terms of what you need to do to get going, obviously the nature of each customer environment is different. So that's really where Andy comes in. Him and his team are very much poised to work with you to ensure that we provide any documentation, any white papers, any references, and any certifications that you need in order to pass this through the stakeholders, so that you can actually install our product within your ecosystem. And as for the actual installation process, obviously Andy and his team will support you in that, but it is very much install it within a node in your environment, whether it's an AWS EC2 or an on-prem solution. And then we have collectors that can collect data. We also have connectors if it's a solution like SharePoint, which doesn't have a data collector directly, but instead a interface that you interface through. So it depends on where your data is, and it depends on all the pieces that you need to connect in order to pull that into our product. But we have lots of integrations and lots of support already baked in. Once again, if you have a very unique environment or you have some specific niche that you need filled, again, we are obviously a growing product, and we would love to support that as part of an integration into our product line. Hopefully that addresses some concerns around the sort of availability of data to our product. So thank you all again for joining and for taking some time out of your day. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.